Bitcoiners, let me just check if I did not check my audio before I got on. We're good. It looks like everything's good. And according to Dave, it is indeed a good morning. Indeed. We got Bitcoin graffiti with a coffin. Indeed, we're going to be talking about exorcisms today. So whether or not you said, oops, Bitcoin graffiti, you're in the ballpark of today's subject matter. So no problem. We did get the coffee, though. Thanks for correcting Bitcoin graffiti. It's not all coffins. Coffee, too, right? We like coffee. Morning, Rickster Swickster. Morning, PH. Good morning, B for Victory. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Enmity and Robert. Robert, give us a good morning and coffee. Indeed, I checked. That sun is doing great this morning. Bitcoin, we still got a lot of unconfirmed, waiting, pending transactions, see what's going on, but it's running just fine, guys. It's running as intended, as it was designed to run. Whether or not there's lots of transactions going through the mempool, we don't care. All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. Excellent. So David Icke was right all along. Yeah, I was lucky enough to come across David Icke and all that business. I worked in a factory for a little bit. I'd worked in so many service industry jobs as a teenager. Like a lot of kids, I had a job at around 13, washing dishes in a restaurant. And, busboy, all that kind of stuff. Quebec is really easy for that. They don't freak out about being young and working in a bar, for example, even if you're way underage, which was kind of cool for me in high school because I could, the drinking age in Quebec, again, it's a totally different scenario in Quebec than it is in the rest of North America. We don't really technically, the drinking is technically 18, but as long as you go and act mature, it's a little bit like Europe. You're going to be fine. No one's going to freak out, right? And so it's a big difference for us when we even move abroad. I still, I've lived in Japan, I've lived in Korea, Barbados, Europe, America. The worst culture shock I ever had was when I moved to Ontario for university, coming from Quebec. And I went out to a bar one of my first nights, and they said, "Well, where's your ID?" And I said, "What are you talking about, ID? Like, what do you mean? I don't have a car. I didn't drive here. I don't have any ID. I'm going inside." No, you need ID to get in. And I was like, "What do you mean ID? Like what?" And he's like a passport. I was like, "A passport? I'm going to the bar. I'm from Canada. What do you mean I need a passport?" Because we don't have that idea in Quebec. There aren't people carding you at a bar to find out if you're 18 or not. I was 16 and I was a regular in a bar. I would close the bar down at 16. I would be the person who would clean up after. And that was just normal. No one really cared. So a major difference in Quebec from the rest of Canada, the rest of North America, in fact. So just one of those things. So I had worked in a service industry job for all those teen years. And at one point I said, I want to change it up a bit. And I worked in a factory and I learned a lot because it was all these Romanian folks, and boy, were they deep into the Eastern European form of brainwashing. And not all brainwashing, but they had a lot of opinions about what was going on and this and that. So I learned and was exposed to all of that stuff. They were all like David Icke maniacs. They loved the David Icke stuff. So I've always been able to follow that. So there you go. So you're not here for stories of my work history. You would like to hear the fakest news I could find. Moscow time. So the terrible stuff going on in Texas with the killing. But The View weighed in, right? Ana Navarro said, being Hispanic or Black does not make you immune from being a white supremacist. Maybe true, I guess. Here's another one. This is, a lot of the trans stuff going on. And we are never fat shamers on this show, for sure. And we are very pro LGBTQ+, right? But this headline has a lot going on, and I got to share it because there's a lot happening here. So trans woman is cleared of flashing her penis at Ohio YMCA after judge ruled she's too fat for her genitals to be visible. I think that was a real headline today. I believe so. I don't want to laugh at anyone here, but that's what's going on. So, when we mentioned that View and a Navarro headline, there's a few classics in there. of that genre that we got to mention as well. So there is Axios also said the rise of white nationalist Hispanics. So there's a whole article on that. But we got to go back to the all-time classic for this, right? Of this genre. And it was when Larry Elder was running for mayor of LA. And he got a, I wish I didn't have to say about the race and the skin color and what's going on with all that. I wish this show could be beyond that, but we are talking about Moscow time here. So we got to mention it, right? So Larry Elder is a black man, and he ran for mayor of LA. I believe he's going to throw his hat in for president if he hasn't already. So he'll be up there for the Republican nomination against Trump and against Vivek Ramaswamy and a few others. Don't quote me on that. It might just be rumors, but he's a pretty interesting guy. So the LA Times took time out of their opinion column section. They took some real estate during the LA elections, of course, of the LA Times. They got to cover their own mayoral election, right? So here was their column. Larry Elder is the blackface of white supremacy. You've been warned. So you can at once vote for a black man if you're a Republican, but also promote white supremacy. So that's great. Lots of options these days. We're all lucky, right? But I've got even better fake news. Those were just the ones to sort of prime the engine here for Moscow time. We have a chef's kiss today for Moscow time. It is from the New York Times. And they're talking about Elizabeth Holmes. Remember Theranos? The Theranos, or however you pronounce it, the big scammer. She said she had all these blood therapeutics. The whole thing was a scam. She never had any blood therapeutics. So she's been convicted of something, blah, blah, blah. No good. She's a villain. And apparently a real scammer. I've never met her and I haven't really followed this case. What I do know is it wasn't really in question whether or not she acted fraudulently. It was the grotesque size of the fraud, as in the whole thing was a fraud, as in it was never real even a little bit. And it's been compared to SBF levels, FTX levels of fraud, because we're going to talk about him in a second. But here's the headline. Liz Holmes wants you to forget about Elizabeth. The black turtlenecks are gone. So is the voice. As the convicted Theranos founder awaits prison, she has adopted a new persona. Devoted mother. They run this puff piece on Theranos' head yesterday. And a lot of people asking, how much does it cost to get one of these puff pieces? Now, I don't think they're really charging, charge us or pay us some money and we'll give you a puff piece. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes, but a lot of people now saying that SBF might get the same thing because what happened with SBF yesterday? Remember, Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes, or now it's just Liz Holmes, right? That's according to the New York Times. Elizabeth is gone. She's a new person. She's turned over a new leaf. And maybe she has. We should encourage her, right? We are all about forgiveness, and we do hope that criminals can reform themselves, including SBF. But SBF not interested, it looks like anyway, in taking responsibility, because yesterday he asked the court to dismiss most of the criminal charges against him. I think he's only left about 3 charges. And he has a bunch of reasons, right? He really blames it all on crypto winter. He says it's because, everyone had a run on their balance sheet and everyone ran out of money. Look at the banks, look at Silicon Valley. Fair point, but they are allowed to do the fractional reserve magic trick. And technically he isn't, right? So kind of apples to oranges here, but indeed asking for all but 3 charges to be dismissed against him. His argument is that the attorneys were in a rush to judgment. And I think we did about a month's worth of shows about how they did not rush to judgment with this guy and he hadn't been charged for weeks. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd have to go back into the tape and see. But I'm pretty sure we did several months waiting for charges to come and what they might have been. He says that it was the tumultuous crypto winter that saw so many crypto firms file for bankruptcy. And they further claimed that additional charges to Bankman-Fried, they violated the extradition treaty with Bahamas. So that's one of his outs. And here the other one is that he's the premise of the fraud, conspiracy, and wire fraud charges is an invalid property interest that cannot be used as the basis for an offense. According to them, the campaign finance allegations, so it's the political stuff against him, should also be dismissed because they lack facts to back them up. So anything he did with politics, no, it was fine. No facts, they say. So they, the lawyers are saying they're being forced to make assumptions about events purportedly underlying the charges against him and attempt to investigate these allegations blindly. So I guess it's because other people turned on him, and the inner circle pleaded guilty to the charges against them, and because they're cooperating, it's an unfair advantage. So the only ones that they haven't complained about and asked for the charges to be dismissed are his securities, commodities, and commodities fraud, and the money laundering. So the rest of the stuff, they say, niet, no good. So we'll see. It's not till October or something. This was just all the preliminary filings. But indeed, if you look at the treatment that the Theranos woman has gotten, it was eerily similar to what SBF had. And a lot of people suggest the political donations had a lot to do with it, and what was going on with those political donations, and how did they create this situation where there was no basically honest feedback, right? Because we talked for a long time about where did the puff pieces on SBF come from. I made a prediction the minute the SBF thing happened. A friend of mine, an old friend, been in the industry for years, called me in a panic saying, the normal reaction when it was all coming down, the markets were cratering, and he was like, this is bad, right? Because you could see the bottom. You could see the bottom falling out. And I said, inevitably, it's going to be good, simply because we're going to find out more and more. There'll be more and more people who maybe weren't so awake politically in the Bitcoin world, maybe still had a little bit of trust for some places like the New York Times. Once they saw the puff pieces come out, which I predicted was going to happen, I said, they're not going to go crazy on this guy. They're going to write Theranos style puff pieces on him. And they did, right? It was, oh, all the people in Bahamas have so much trouble because the philanthropic people are gone. I think there was even an article, oh, all of his philanthropic ambitions are dashed by this untimely bankruptcy and fraud charges. There was like a million articles written that way. And I said that alone is going to wake people up to what's going on and get people attuned to what's happening. It turns out that Vivek Ramaswamy has written a book about this very subject. It just came out like 2 weeks ago. It came out, he published it in late April. I guess everyone who runs for president needs to have some kind of a book out. Of course, RFK Jr. has his book, The Real Anthony Fauci, which he published late last year. So Vivek's book, I only just recently heard about it. It's called Capitalist Punishment. It's a good title. And it says how Wall Street is using your money to create a country you didn't vote for. And they've got the Wall Street Bull, locked into that thing. I forget what it's called, where they put your hands in your head, like for punishment in the Wild West, whatever that thing was called. So they got the bull locked into that thing. Here's a description of the book, The Wall Street Cartel. And that's, I'm glad he's even seizing on that word. Remember, we've talked a lot here about the history of the Federal Reserve, and that its name, colloquially, in the time that it was created by the people who were there to criticize it, like Teddy Roosevelt, called it exactly that, a bank cartel, right? The whole idea of even calling a bank trust had already been, the connotations of a trust were already a cartel at the time, right? The trust busting that Teddy Roosevelt did as president against Standard Oil and some of the other large monopolies that were called trusts was really about destroying these cartels that work together to create these monopolies. So that Vivek is even starting that the Wall Street cartel has quietly seized control. So he's calling it a cartel. Excellent, right? The Wall Street cartel has quietly seized control of the American economy, and they are forcing governments and businesses to bow to their political agenda, using your money to do it. 3 Wall Street firms have quietly amassed more money than Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Andrew Carnegie, and John Rockefeller combined. But the money isn't even theirs. These asset managers have accumulated all their power through passive funds, as most investors no longer believe anyone can reliably pick stocks. Well, that's true, right? But stock picking is not a real thing, by the way. There's no such thing. Warren Buffett, we were talking about that yesterday. Warren Buffett talks about that all the time. And that's his big lesson in life, is that he started off in the business stock picking. It doesn't work, right? So the way to do it in his way, is in his mind, is have the time preference to look into a company that you think one day is going to grow, and just invest in good companies that you think are great. 1 second. Sorry. Here's what he says, though. As an entrepreneur, Vivek Ramaswamy reveals. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. As entrepreneur, Vivek Ramaswamy reveals the results are all bad and working their way into every corner of the economy. They forced U.S. companies to adopt racial equity audits and emissions caps while supporting human rights atrocities in China. They coerce Western companies to produce less oil while shifting production to dirtier places like Russia. They allow companies like, this is the important one, they allow companies like FTX to take victory laps on good management while collapsing like a house of cards because their management is terrible. So this is something that we've talked about a lot. It's the feedback loop. It's the lack of feedback loop. It's the inability to actually put one foot in front of the other and know you're going in one direction instead of walking blindly and aimlessly and without much direction and without any concept of where a North Star is or where any form of real direction is. And that's how you end up getting things like this. So exactly what he's saying here about the lack of feedback loops, how we've allowed folks like FTX to be praised for their governance, while the minute we find out what's really going on, they actually are all turning on each other, getting plea deals because they're mostly criminals, right? So indeed, Daniel here has mentioned one of the analogies that I use by turning Wall Street into a risk-free environment because so much of it is co-opted. You actually make it into like a porno, right? That people don't understand risks. And the whole thing is just simulated autoerotic instances, right? And you get a sense of that when you read this next headline. And this is everything that Janet Yellen was talking about yesterday. So here's Janet Yellen talking about the debt limit increase. Okay, so here's the headline that managed to get all kinds of traction, right? So she says, Yellen blasts draconian Republican cuts, pushes debt limit hike. Treasury Secretary warns failure to raise limit is a catastrophe. Yellen sees risk for roll of dollar if Congress doesn't act. Now, Mark Moss, a friend of the Bitcoin show, will be speaking on stage next week, says the draconian cuts will force the government to keep budget increases to 1% a year. So draconian is just 1% a year, the number being raised by. That's draconian. Draconian. 1% growth, draconian. Caps not applied to Social Security or Medicare. So that doesn't even have to deal with the 1% caps. Tighten up welfare rules, which has seen a 240% increase over 30 years, and cut some of the $80 billion for new IRS funding, right? And then they say cancel student loan forgiveness, repeal some parts of the Inflation Reduction Act, all political stuff, repeal restrictions on U.S. energy policy, lots of people talking about that, put U.S. back on the path of energy independence, the same thing, right? So that's what she's calling draconian, right? That's a pretty big criticism of what seems like a pretty mild vanilla milquetoast proposition from the Republicans. Many people say the Republicans didn't go nearly far enough for the type of discipline and feedback that would be required to deal with the situation that America has. So, what do you make of someone who's calling that draconian? Well, there was a really good take. And it starts with something that Mike Cernovich said. So Mike Cernovich really gets into the demons and the angels and the spiritual pollution. And you don't necessarily have to see it in a spiritual sense. And I'm going to tell you who he was repeating. And it's a guy named James Lindsay, Conceptual James. Now, I'm going to give you a few warnings about Conceptual James before, because normally I wouldn't be bringing his points of view forward. He's a bit of a know-it-all, in the sense that he's one of these guys who still looks down on Bitcoin because he's so smart, because he's full of credentials, and he wishes that a lot of like Republicans were smarter too. He's one of these guys, right? Well, we need more smart people in the room, and So his points on Bitcoin already make me suspect something's wrong with this guy, Conceptual James, right? But he has had good tweets in the past. I followed him a lot during COVID. I lost faith in him at one point during COVID. I forget what it was exactly, but something about him handling a question about 2 years ago made me think something's up with this guy, right? So I don't want to give him a super endorsement is kind of what I'm getting at. Normally when I bring up folks like Schellenberger, I welcome his criticisms of Bitcoin. I think he's in good faith. This guy, I'm not sure if he's in good faith. All right. I'm not sure. So, and what I mean by that is I don't know who pays this guy's bills. I think he's one of these Cato Institute people, but I don't know enough about it. Right. So I just know I don't have a ton of faith in this guy. But this tweet thread that he gave was interesting. Cernovich retweeted it. I saw it, and I'm sharing it with you because it's interesting when we think about Yellen and what she said about Draconian, SBF, and all the stuff that's going on there, and just what's going on around us. So here's what he says. On a suggestion earlier, and gets into some esoteric and indeed unseen dimension stuff. So let's go. On a suggestion earlier, I watched a lecture from... yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. So it's not just me. I've been reading and listening to a lot of James Lindsay lately. I can't fault him on analysis on. Okay. Yeah. So you've seen him. Yeah. It was a little sign that he was not totally being forthright, which made me drop him about 2 years ago. That's all I'm saying. Right. That's all I'm saying. So I'm not trying to dissuade anyone from reading his other stuff. I'm just trying to say he's not coming in quite at the same level of recommendation I would do most people, but this is a good tweet thread. So that's all I'm saying. So on a suggestion earlier, I watched a lecture from a Catholic priest who is also an exorcist. It's about demonology, and it was sent to me unsurprisingly because it offers some insights into communist psychology. Now, I don't literally believe in demons, but I got some insights. The biggest thing that stuck out to me is that he claimed that demons are characterized by an absolute and intentional rejection of the assignment they have been given. And in that absolute rejection, they are damned and so work to negate that they were what they were supposed to do. I don't think there's a better definition for demonic than that. Having been led through self-pity to self-hate takes it upon themselves to negate the true purpose for their being, which on some level they know as rebellious angels, demons would know it perfectly. He also pointed out that demons influence people through their emotions and their interpretations of features of their lives. I found that accurate to the purpose of understanding communist psychology also, as I've been calling it a religion of pathos for some time now. If we take the logos as the order and structure of the universe, demonology would describe willful rejection of the logos. Nothing could make such an invitation better than emotion that eventually turns toxic, pathos turned pathological. Self-pity to self-hate to just hate. The third thing that really stuck out to me is that something that combats demonic influence is structure and discipline, particularly discipline involving intentional sacrifice. He recommended the usual fasting, prayer under strict discipline, but it would generalize. Being disciplined in anything requiring sacrifice trains the will and would build upon itself in positive directions. It creates the structure into which the vices can easily creep. Unstructured life leads to failures that are easy to externalize onto others or systems. Practicing discipline always moves the locus of control inward and teaches us to practice moving the locus of control inward. Let me read that again. Practicing discipline always moves the locus of control inward and teaches us to practice moving the locus of control inward. If there's no difficulty, parentheses, sacrifice, it's not very effective. If you're complaining about the sacrifice, it's not going to work. Practicing discipline grants a growing sense of mastery over one's circumstances. And when that sense of mastery gets strong, it's harder and harder to blame others for your failures or expect or even want them to take care of things for you. You grow into liberty. That's, I think, a really important thing that we mention here a lot, growing into liberty. It's a personal thing. It's how you practice your life, right? You don't just vote for the right group and then they give you liberty. You know, the one of the most beautiful songs that Bob Dylan wrote called My Back Pages, which is about him condemning sort of left-wing politics that had conscripted him, he believed. And it goes, you know, one of the lines goes, I learned that liberty is not just equality at school. Liberty, I learned those words as if a wedding vow, but I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now. So it's all of these things of him sort of pretending to be naive, and now he's learned how the world really works and sort of won't go along with it, right? But I love that, liberty is not just equality in school. And he wrote that in the 1960s, right? That is not really the definition of liberty. It's a lot different than that. And he sort of gets into that aspect right there. So it's a great song if any of you want to listen to it sometime. So here's the last piece of the James Lindsay tweet thread. The fourth thing that stuck out was that instead is that he insisted that being under God's law provides protection. This honestly makes sense, even from an atheistic position. If we merely accept natural law means something. Submitting to truth, logos, lends itself to success and peace. Combining these last 2 points about protection from demons, submitting humbly to the world as it is, or God, or the laws of nature and God's nature, and disciplining yourself so that you can work productively in it leads to prosperity. Warring with it or being sloppy doesn't. Being at war with the laws of nature and nature's God, or merely derelict, will reliably return bad results. Combined with self-pity, immaturity, and entitlement/indulgence, this leads to externalizing one's failure and thus one's locus of control. Destruction lies that way. There's another point in there that I don't want to misrepresent from the demonology that boils down to the malice of the demon coming from his own knowing rejection of his created purpose, resulting from knowing what God is and knowing also he cannot be that, a primordial envy. Now, there's things you can disagree with in it. He's just sharing his continuum of thoughts, right? But if you're sitting here and you're looking at what happened with Janet Yellen, for example, right? She's moved things immediately into the pathos, into the world of fear, of mean, of there's going to be so many victims, it'll be a catastrophe if we do things this way, and putting all the focus on that, of course, right? All the focus on what they need to do in the short term to fix problems in order that America doesn't become a deadbeat, as they said, even though America has many times failed to pay its bills. And again, it looks a little bit like what SBF, and I don't know what's going on with the Theranos woman, right? We want forgiveness. We're not here to make people live in perpetuity as guilty parties. We want everyone to be able to evolve beyond that, right? I don't know what's going on with Elizabeth Holmes, but this other SBF fella doesn't sound like he's getting there, right? We hear him with 1,000,001 excuses, and now it's crypto winter, right? When anyone could tell you that most of the downswing the industry suffered over the winter was largely the result of him and his house of cards falling. There were so many knock-on effects. I know as an industry planning our event in May already, we had to make terrible choices in November, right when this happened, like really tough choices, because we could see all the collateral damage in the industry and everything that it was doing, and we had to be able to manage that, right? It wasn't that simple. So as we saw those troubles happening, we made tough choices, and we took responsibility for it, right? You had no choice but to do that. And then if you listen to someone like him who is now saying, oh, it was because the market fell, right? That I'm actually not guilty. I'm only guilty of securities and commodities fraud and those things. Just one second. So this sort of feedback thing is, I think, what's really important, right? That you can actually look into yourself to find out where you need to have discipline and where you need to be able to practice liberty in the real world, right? And how much of a responsibility, we talked about personal responsibility yesterday. It's a lot of that, right? It's a lot of that stuff. And that's in many ways the war that World War III is looking like the battle lines are, right? It really is between, are we going to live in a world where we have many masters, or are we going to live in a world where I'm not the boss of you and you're not the boss of me, and we're going to find a way to get along? So which is it going to be, right? And that's what it looks like we're fighting out over. And, this whole idea of even discipline and charting your path in the world, right? It's one of the things that I'm always mentioning about AI and what AI can actually help us unlock. The cognitive increase that can come from AI, if AI acts as your third eye, if it acts as a way for you to reach and achieve some form of self-actualization, of personal growth, as a tool to help you exercise greater liberty in your own actions in life, if it can be applied to the sort of discipline that we're seeing as the dividing line between angels and demons, right? Demons being those who simply can't get on the right track, reject the concept of a track, envy anyone who's on a track and a path. That whole dichotomy and the amount of people stuck in that world waiting on Janet Yellen to do one thing or another, to complain about it, or say it's more institutional racism, or say if she doesn't do it and save people, it's also institutional racism. Institutional racism is a real thing, by the way. We're not trying to ignore that it's there. What we're trying to say is that what she's saying, that any little perceived legislative action is draconian and it's emotional and you're going to create victims if you do it this way, is not really someone who seems like they're on some form of golden path, or, I don't exactly see Janet Yellen exercising her third eye and her perception of unseen dimensions and what it means for her spiritual growth. I could be wrong, but it looks to me like she's in the same boat as SBFs of the world, which is, put your raw brain horsepower and give it a little muscle and we'll be fine. But this whole idea of following a path, here's a story that I saw from Elon Musk published just a few days ago. No, sorry, it was published a few years ago, but someone was bringing it up and it was making the rounds on Twitter. And it shows you just the kind of faith some people have, and what an amazing thing it would be to have learned from this. So this is Elon Musk and his dad, right? So it turns out Elon Musk and his dad, the whole family, the dad owned an airplane in South Africa, and they were going to take a trip to England and sell the plane when they got to England. So they're on their way and the plane gets diverted and it has to land in Italy. And they meet these people in Italy, and they say they actually want to buy the plane. So he trades the plane for a little bit of an emerald mine in Zambia. And that's how the family got into the emerald mining business. Just complete coincidence, complete circumstance. And there it is, right? So I don't mean to mention that story as any like, wow, it's so amazing. But just look at someone like Elon Musk, who has many times bet his entire future on things that looked crazy. I mean, people still talking about, oh, what an idiot. Who would spend $44 billion on Twitter? What did he get out of it? What's it worth now? It's only worth half. What a moron. He lost $20 billion. Oh my God. Anyone who is in that sort of low IQ way of analyzing what Elon Musk did is completely ignoring this follow a path, use a bit of your gut instinct. That doesn't mean going gut all the time, right? But that means that you do have an inner compass. You do have something that's helping you find your way, and you've got to cultivate it and stay on that path. Otherwise, you quickly fall into this self-pitying inability to take responsibility and put one foot in front of the other and know you're going in the right direction, right? So wasn't that Elon Musk's grandfather? Could be. Here, I mean, maybe I'm just getting bad info from the article that I read. It could be the grandfather. Unsure. That's what his mother experienced, I think, when they left. Unsure. Yeah, unsure Bitcoin graffiti. Unsure. It says here father, but I'm not getting it exactly out of the article. I'm getting someone quoting the article and the article headline. So I could be wrong. Yeah, I could be wrong. But it seems like this is something he would have perceived on his own and would have been instructional in his life, and sort of suggests how the ways he's going to act and behave as he goes forward. So anyway, I bring it up just within that context. And even take another speaker that we have coming to Bitcoin 2023 next week, Zoltan Pozar, right? So we got Zoltan coming. Wall Street Journal did a story on him yesterday, and I mean this also in the sense of where some of this Wall Street feedback, how much it's changing, where some of these people are going, because we got angels and demons in Wall Street too. Not everyone's a demon, like and in need of an exorcism like Janet Yellen or SBF, right? So Zoltan, not to say he's a hero or anything, but this is someone who's become really famous in the past few years. Doing what? Something that I say is vital all the time, making predictions, right? You make a prediction. If you get it right, often it means you had the world properly categorized when you first made that prediction. So Zoltan made a lot of predictions coming out of the financial crisis and over the last 10 years. And it looks like he's been the most right in all the public predictions he's made, which means throughout this period, you could probably assess him to be the most aware person around global macro finance, right? Because he had a worldview. That worldview was predictive. Therefore, the worldview he had when he made the prediction probably more accurate than other people. So they did a big piece on him yesterday in the Wall Street Journal. So Zoltan Pozar, a widely followed Credit Suisse markets guru, left the bank, obviously, part of an exodus of staff that started in the months before the lender's shotgun takeover by a rival. And the headline is that he's, his writing is dense and esoteric and quite a hit. And indeed, he is one of the few people who's capable of seeing things just one level abstracted from what most writers are capable of seeing. So he's putting things in a larger historical context than I think you'll see most writers doing out there. And even now, we have him coming to the show, and he's kind of like this free agent guy and looking for, I think, more traction in our industry, right? So he's actually taking time to meet with an audience that he knows is more financially literate, more aware of what's going on, and more likely to connect with his stuff. 1 second. Jeez, it's just getting so loud in the kitchen this morning. These walls are not the same as the last Barbados house, so I hear kind of everything. I hope the sound isn't coming through too much, and you're not hearing too much background stuff. Let me know if you are. I'll try and figure out how to stop it. The studio is not quite ready. We're gonna get some stuff in the background here, and we're fixing things as we go. So let me see where I was. So Zoltan coming to the industry. You get people who are more and more interested in connecting with an audience that actually provides feedback that's useful and not just sitting there saying, oh, what is Janet Yellen going to say? And that's everything, right? So, all right. The next part is, I guess, that feedback loop again, and this war between whether or not it's going to be experts and top-down organization versus a world where people are not the boss of you, and I'm not the boss of you, and you're not the boss of me, and we all have a lot more personal responsibility. Well, here's the thing that you can see where that sort of fault line is moving, and it's obviously Canada, always usually among the first to be stupid and the first to be down the dystopian pathway of we got so many bosses for you that we don't know what to do, so here's your new bosses. So Canada, very much a country focused on what do the experts say, what does the person in charge say, what should I do, who's in charge here, they got to tell me what to do. If they don't tell me what to do, I don't know what to do. So now the Bank of Canada just released a survey on CBDCs, and of course it's typical cheery Canada, right? None of the framing is like bad, but it proves they're going to get takers. So here's what they say. They have questions such as, they only ask if you want to hold or receive a limited amount of money anonymously, and don't even mention sending money anonymously. So they're wondering if you're willing to take anonymous money, not even send, right? That's where they're trying to frame this conversation. So there's that part. All kinds of crazy questions on ranking importance of features of money. So they want you to say ability to review transactions and your remaining balance, earning loyalty points, the ability to integrate seamlessly with current accounts and payment methods, the ability to make private transactions, the ability to dispute payments and obtain a refund, the ability to make transactions without having a bank account, international payments, no fee transactions. So some of it good, right? Some of it fine. But most of it is just trying to find out what people are willing to live with and without. And as James Melville says here, it's part of a pilot scheme, and is another one of these boxes that we can check where just a few years ago, if you'd have said a government-controlled CBDC that permits spending according to moral arguments or prescriptions about what can be spent on, then you were called a conspiracy theorist, right? You were called a conspiracy theorist. And so here you go. We have this instance where it's here already, right? It's already here. It took no time at all, and we're in the world where this is being mentioned. So there you go. All right, let me see. Bushmasters, Emerald Mine is father, but Elon said, okay, well, sorry, then I take it back, Bushmaster. Thanks for the fact check. I thought it was just a good example of what I'm talking about, of a little bit of the going with your instincts and gut. And there's many more examples in the world. Didn't need that one. I just saw it today and thought it fit. So thank you for fact checking. He never saw or read facts about the mine. Elon's words. Yeah, okay. It's that's what it is. Love the media artwork. Yeah. Hassan Naguib, oh Canada. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, that was Haldeman, Elon's grandfather. He thought Canada become too bureaucratic and then shipped a plane to Africa and left his family to find the lost city. Oh, really? After they settled in Pretoria. Okay, thanks. Okay, so there is some little bit of truth to it. Yeah, they came back to Canada at one point. Canada and South Africa used to be, and were supposed to be best friends. They were supposed to be the two most important Commonwealth countries, and that was sort of decided when England was still top of the heap in the late 1800s. That's why to this day, the South African High Consulate, or the High Council, is next to our Prime Minister's house and the Governor General's house. It's sort of the best address in Ottawa if you want to be close to what was perceived as the locus of power 100 and something years ago. So, but it, things turned out different, and Canada was one of the first to abandon and criticize them for apartheid and all that stuff. Wizard of Oz put up a good trick. They got us to think the Fed is nor a company, nor their money is a product commodity, nor it's a monopoly. Yeah. Very good trick. It's a commodity producer. And you see it now, right? Remember we talked about the Dutch disease, Bitcoin graffiti, about the number one export. When one export dominates too much, one commodity export, one resource export dominates too much. In the case of Holland, where the theory comes from, they made so much money off oil that it imbalanced the economy in the 1970s, which is where the economic principle of Dutch disease comes from, which is where all resource-rich jurisdictions like Alberta and Saudi Arabia and the UAE designed policies to not replicate what the Dutch did in the 1970s. And it turns out, and we've mentioned it here before, that the US number one export is now debt, right? We have Dutch disease based on debt. The financialization of the system created this weird commodity that completely destroyed feedback loops in our society. So that's what we're left with. If inflation is 3% and you're living on Social Security, then a 1% increase is a cut. Yeah, I know, Brian. Indeed, it is, but it's still about discipline, right? Like the complaining and the turning it into logos and the pathos of, oh, we can't do it. It's not possible. It's draconian. Now, I get it is a cut. I get it. But what they're saying is have some discipline. And so if you think of what conceptual James Lindsay mentioned from that Exorcist about the fault line between demons and angels really is whether or not you have discipline and can build on it from day to day and get on a golden path or a right path or whatever it is, or the path you were intended for. And then the opposite being, it hurts, don't do it, it's your fault, stop, right? So that she embraced that is why I'm saying she probably does need an exorcism. She's probably some form of demon. She looks like a little demon, doesn't she? You know, a little, you know, but we love her. It's great. We don't want her to go anywhere. She's too good for Bitcoin, right? That the face and the no auditing and the crazy shit that comes out of her mouth, and that she still thinks there's like other jobs that she can do, like fix China relations with America. It's great. Like we don't want her to go anywhere right now. 4 more years of Janet Yellen will be great for Bitcoin. That's just me, you know. But I'm an accelerationist. They say I'm an accelerationist. So I'm looking forward to a Fetterman presidency and Janet Yellen reinstated at the Treasury. That would just be great. That would be a lot of fun. Yeah, there's that quote on James. I recommend his YouTube playlist called Bullets on his channel called New Discourses. Thanks, Amity. Yeah, look, I'm not against them per se. I just saw some stuff a few years ago that made me think he's not exactly honest. My filter for psyop running people is probably too high, right? I probably have too many triggers. I just worried that he was involved in the game of that I don't like seeing people play, which is manipulating. You know, I thought he was a manipulator at one point, so we'll see. I could be wrong. Once again, it was just a gut feeling. The air came out of the paper Bitcoin balloon and all the shitcoining drifter. Yeah, they did, Daniel. They did. Indeed. All right, team. Elon came back to Canada. Yeah, he came back to. How's the book coming on? The book's done. I'm going to be releasing it. So here's the deal. We're about to hit 1,000 subs. We should hit it by next week, I would imagine, with the show. So the following week, I'm going to start serializing release. So I'll start releasing a chapter, maybe a day, something like that. I'll have time. Maybe it'll be every 2 days or something. And I might even do some video sessions with it because I've got some pretty good trove of mid-journey concept art that I've got. So I might do like an audio version with just some of the images. I can't quite get it fully as consistent as a graphic novel, but I think I can do a couple images, 4 or 5 images a chapter. Say I read a chapter and record it over like 5 minutes. You'll probably have, 5 or 6 images per 5 minutes, and I'll just swipe through them. You wouldn't see me and I would read it. So that's just one product I'm thinking about doing. Let me know if that sounds a good idea. But I will just be releasing each chapter. When we get to the end, I will put it all together and put a book on Amazon for sale that you can order that will be physical or digital. Still having a bit of a staggered release, but we're good. I mean, the book's been done for a while, so we're okay on the storyline. I've even put it through the AI because the book is written from the point of view of an AI, which I came up with a few years ago. And I asked ChatGPT to edit it for readability, ease of reading, and all that. And it mostly came back exactly as I had written it. So I'd say, it was strong editing already. Elon came back to Canada at 18 with his brother. Yeah, I met his brother before. He spoke at my event last year. Elon's bio. Yeah, I'll check that out. Ashley Vance is a nice book. He's getting the Walter Isaacson treatment right now, right? Well, and I love Walter Isaacson's bios, so I'll probably read that one. Dutch disease is amazing, increasing the demand of the currency. Yeah. I wonder it could be combated if you use the appreciated currency to buy the scarce assets abroad. I think they tried that and got into some trouble too. Bitcoin graffiti. I think there's like books and books and books written on Dutch disease. They did think of it. It was not that simple. It was not that simple. Draconian is pretty over the top. All right, team. That's all I got for today. I will see you all tomorrow. Thanks for joining today. Thanks for having the morning here with us, talking about exorcisms and angels and demons. Peace, everyone.